Hey everybody, we are back. Now if you're new to this is the first video you jumped in, we are going over the book Working with the Law by Raymond Holliwell. We are on chapter 2 right now. Chapter 2 is a law of thinking. And before we get started, if you are new, you want to kind of back up a couple videos, you want to go over the introduction and chapter 1, because the reason why I say this is that yes, you can maybe easily catch up, but this is one of my favorite all-time books. And maybe I have maybe 4 or 5 favorite all-time books that I constantly reread over and over and over again. And this is one of them. And at this point with chapter 2 is setting the tone for the rest of the book. But chapter 2 is each chapter is going to go on universal laws, and each chapter is going to be a new universal law. And remember, with universal laws, no matter if you believe it or don't, the laws of the universe is either working for you or against you. It doesn't matter what you believe. Now this time I'm going to put on my handy dandy glasses just to make it easier to read. That way things are not blurry. We're on chapter 2. Law of thinking. Now again, this is the first chapter. We're actually diving into universal laws. So in this chapter is very short. It's only about 5 pages. But I want to say a big but here is that I almost highlighted this whole chapter. So we're going to go through this whole chapter because, like I said before, with old school prosperity teachers, just like Raymond Holliwell, is that it's just full of wisdom. There's very, very, very little fluff. And I liked this chapter, so we're going to go over everything in this chapter. Maybe except a couple paragraphs, but we're going to go over everything. And I love this quote. As a man thinketh in his heart, so he is. Proverbs 23:7. And we'll discuss this. I won't discuss this now, but we'll discuss it later on in this chapter. So we're on the law of thinking. This is a universal law, and he's kind of coming at a good pace. So if you did see the first video, the introduction plus chapter 1, he's really moving on to a good pace, and he's connecting each chapter. So each chapter is growing from one chapter to the next. So like I said in the beginning, is if this is your first time, go back to the introduction and catch yourself up before you actually move on, because this is actually you getting success, you making the law work for you, no matter if we call it manifesting, law of attraction, law of assumption. Okay, because a lot of people can conceptually debate and argue and carry on a conversation what they feel, what universal laws are, manifesting, law of attraction, law of assumption. A lot of people can debate with you and stuff like that, but what you have to do is you have to look at your own life and ask a deep question. If you're not living the life that you really want, then something's missing, something's off. You're doing something in your life that's throwing it off, where you're kind of limiting success in your life, or you're limiting manifesting greatness in your life. You're doing something wrong. Okay, and I'm kind of going to be in your face about it. Just like with me, if my life isn't going the way I want it to, I'm doing something wrong. So other than that, let's jump into this, because we're going to talk a lot in this chapter. So let's begin. To the average person, life is an enigma. If I can talk English, that's a hard word to say. A deep mystery, a complex and inconceivable problem, or it appears so. But it's very simple if one holds the key. Mystery is another name for ignorance. All things are mysteries when they are not understood. But when we understand life, it no longer appears a mystery. And I want to add to this is it kind of reminds me of when, especially on social media nowadays, when people don't understand something, when people don't understand religions or the Bible, they don't really understand manifesting the laws of the universe, they tend to make fun of it. You know what I mean? They tend to make rash comments. People tend to make fun of something that they don't really understand. So that's really kind of what popped in my head when I read this paragraph. Man is a progressive being, a creature of constant growth. Before him lies an illimitable ocean of progress to be navigated and conquered only by development and culture of its inherent powers. The progress of the individual is largely determined by his ruling mental state, because the mind is the basic factor and governing power in the entire life of man. Attention should be given to the predominant mental state, for it will regulate the action and direction of all one's forces, faculties, and powers, the sum total of which will inevitably determine many particular experiences in their personal fate. Now I'm going to turn this thing on green because I really love up here when he says man is a progressive being, a creature of constant growth. Because remember, we've always heard the saying that we're constantly growing. If you're not growing, you're dying. Okay, and there's a lot of truth in that, because remember, energy. Okay, energy is constantly moving. So what that means is in our life we don't stay stagnant. We think we stay stagnant. We think we stay in the same place. Okay, year after year, year after year, but we're either constantly growing forward or moving forward, or we're moving backwards. We're not staying the same. We're not staying stagnant. Energy is constantly moving. And the example I want to give to this is probably the greatest example I can think of. Okay, let's say in high school you played all the sports and you're in massive shape. You're in great shape. And even right now, I'm in okay shape, but I'm not in shape that I used to be in my 20s, I used to be in my late teens. Okay, I was in way better shape. But what happens when you stop working out after high school, after college? You're not running around all the time. What happens? Year after year, you're not working out. And let's fast forward for 5 years. You stop working out for 5 years. What happens? Well, you get out of shape. One day you wake up, you look in the mirror, and you, as a guy, maybe you have a little belly on you now, you're out of shape. That's really the prime example. Energy is constantly moving. We're not staying stagnant. We're not staying the same. We're either moving forwards or backwards. And when we used to be in great shape, and once we stop working out, and we stop working out for years, we start going backwards. We start getting out of shape. Because energy, we don't stay the same. We're either moving forward and getting better, or we're getting worse. The ruling state of the mind is made up of various mental attitudes, which the individual adopts toward things, events, and life in general. If his attributes are broad in mind, optimistic in tone, and true to life, his predominant mental state will correspond and exhibit a highly constructive and progressive tendency, as almost all the forces of his personality function through the conscious mind in one way or another. And as the daily mental and physical acts are largely controlled by the conscious mind, it is obvious that the leading mental state will determine the direction in which the powers of the individual are to proceed. Now, in this paragraph, he's actually talking about our conscious mind. He's not talking about our subconscious mind. Now, remember, our subconscious mind, and we'll talk more about this later on in the book, our subconscious mind is more dominant when we're in a sleepy state, or we actually go to sleep. Now, in life, in our 3D world, our conscious mind is in control. So when we're dealing with the law of thinking is when we're awake in our 3D world. So that's what he's talking about. Our conscious mind is in control. Our conscious mind is that's our analytical mind. That's our thinking mind. Okay, remember he's not talking about the subconscious mind here. Our subconscious mind, whatever your thoughts are, positive or negative, our subconscious mind just takes it as is. There's no personality there. There's no humor. There's no joking. It just takes it as is, no matter if you're thinking negative or positive. If you're thinking negative and those thoughts are predominant, well, your subconscious mind is going to bring you that. So, but one way we control it with the law of thinking is we have to control our conscious mind. And our conscious mind is a waking mind during the day within our 3D world. If this ruling mental state is upward bound, that is aspiring, harmonious, and positive, all his forces will be directed into constructive channels. But if his state of mind is downward in tendency, that is discordant and negative, then almost all his forces will be misdirected. It is evident, therefore, that all the factors which regulate the life and experience of man, none perhaps exercise a greater influence than the ruling state of mind. And I love how he put it. That's why I highlighted this in green, is because he's really talking about like attracts like. If you're thinking positive and you're constantly thinking positive, you're doing what you like to do, your conscious mind is always thinking in a positive notion. Well, like attracts like. You're going to slowly start bringing positive things into your life. And he says the reverse is also true. If we start thinking negative and our mind is just focused on the negative, or we're constantly thinking about things we don't like to do, bad things that happen at work, negative conversations with our friends all the time. So like attracts like. So when we're thinking negative and we're focused on it, well, our subconscious mind is going to be like, well, Chad likes this. Chad likes all this negative stuff, so I'm going to bring more negative to him. So like is always going to attract like. Mental attitudes are the result of ideas, and these have their origin in the points of view. Therefore, by seeking true and natural points of view, one may secure the best and most superior ideas, and these in turn will determine the predominating state of mind. We are prone to believe more than what we see. And I love this quote, and this quote we're going to discuss here in a second. We are prone to believe more than what we see. The evidences of the senses are the only facts that some accept, but now we shall realize more and more that it is what we believe that determines what we shall see. So now he's really talking about what we believe. He's really looking at the law of thinking. It's on the inside out. Remember, we kind of discussed this before. Most of us are trained from the outside in. Okay, but it's actually reversed. It's from the inside out. So our deep beliefs is what we're going to attract into our lives. Our deep-rooted beliefs that we have are going to come outward. And remember, I've said this before, is that our deep-rooted beliefs, by psychologists, this is true, is formed by the age of 7. So this is like scary information. Like our deep-rooted beliefs, we've already formed as a kid. By the time we're 7, our core beliefs have already been formed. So I kind of catch up where I'm at here. The evidences of the senses are the facts that some accept, but now we shall realize more and more that it is what we believe that determines what we shall see. In other words, believing is seeing. So what we believe inside our imagination, our core beliefs, believing is seeing. It's coming from the inside of us out, not from the outside in. More defeats and failures are due to the mental blindness than to moral deviations. If one lived only by physical sight, his world would be very small. It is said of a bug that its world is only as large as the size of the leaf that which it lives. And many times it does not live long enough to consume the whole leaf. With man, if he lived according to the senses, the largest sense he possessed would be that of sight. Thus our whole world would extend only as far as we could see. Now he's kind of going into our senses here, and he's going to expand on this. And usually what happens with our senses, we're trained to live by our senses. When we go to school, college, they're training us by our senses. And our senses is see, hear, smell, taste, touch. These are our 5 senses. By our 5 senses, you're soon going to start realizing our 5 senses are lower faculties. It's a lower vibration with our 5 senses. We're not really trained on higher consciousness. We're not really trained on our higher senses or higher faculties. And some examples are perception, intuition. We're not trained, in school to really perceive and have perception, have intuition, have our gut feelings, hearing that small voice which has the answers for us. We're trained on our lower faculties. We're trained on our 5 senses, not our higher faculties. If we believed in the testimony of our eyes, we would accept many conditions that are not true. I'll say this one more time. If we believed in the testimony of our eyes, we would accept many conditions that are not true. For example, if you look down a railroad track, you will observe that at a certain distance, the 2 tracks converge at one point. This is not true. Have you ever stood on a boardwalk and watched a ship slowly sink into the sea as it sailed away? That ship wasn't sinking. Our eyes tell us falsely. When you are worried over some obstacle or problem, just remind yourself that it may be purely an illusion of your senses, that it may not be true at all, according to the law. And this is why I gave you this examples. I thought it was so true. Like, he's really going into the weakness of our five senses. The weakness of sight is that, if you're on a beach and you're looking far away and you see a ship out as far as we can see, and if it's going away from us, sooner or later, it just looks like it just basically sank into the sea, or it almost looks like it drove off the edge of the earth. But that's not true. It didn't sink. It didn't drive off the earth. You know what I mean? But it's the falsehood of our sight that makes it look so. And that falsehood of sight, our sight isn't always true. It can be an illusion of what we kind of see. Thought is a subtle element. Although it is invisible to the physical sight, it is an actual force or substance as real as electricity, light, heat, water, or even stone. We are surrounded by a vast ocean of thought stuff through which our thoughts pass like currents of electricity, tiny streaks of light or mystical waves. You can flash your thoughts from pool to pool, completely around the world many times in less than a single second. Scientists tells us that thought is compared with the speed of light. Listen to this. Scientists tell us that thought is compared with the speed of light. When you have a thought, it's just as fast as the speed of light. They tell us our thoughts travel at a rate of 186,000 miles per second. Our thought travels 930,000 times faster than the sound of our voice. No other force or power in the universe yet known is great or as quick. It is a proven fact scientifically that the mind is a battery of force, the greatest of any known element. And even today, this book was written in 1967, and even today of 2024, they're really not any farther with mind development than they were back when this book was written. Honestly, our brain and mind development it's not even taught in schools. Our school system is really stuck back in the 1950s, just teaching the same information over and over and over and over and over. We're not really progressing. We think we're progressing, but we're really not. And they don't know any more about the mind than what they did back in the 1960s and 1967. Even when the old school prosperity teachers, they have a lot of evidence, a lot of scientific evidence, even back when books were written in the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, the 20s, on this information. And all this information is just regurgitated actually today. People just teach, new prosperity teachers today just teach this information. It is our power to think that determines our state of living. Listen to this. It is our power to think that determines our state of living. He's going into positive and negative. If your thoughts are positive, that's going to determine the type of life you're going to have. As one is able to think, he generates a power that travels far and near, and this power sets up a radiation which becomes individual as he determines it. Our thoughts affect our welfare and often affect others we think of. The kinds of thoughts we register on our memories or habitually think attracts the same kind of conditions. He's kind of getting fancy here, but again, he's talking about like attracts like. Your thoughts, whatever your thoughts are, positive or negative, has to attract like for like. If it's negative, it attracts negative. If it's positive, it attracts positive. If we take the thought of success and keep it in our mind, the thought elements will be attracted, for a like attracts like. Just what I said. We are mentally drawn to the universal thought currents of success, and these thought currents of success are existent all around us. We will physically contact minds who think along the same lines, and later such minds will be brought into our lives. Therefore, successful-minded people help success come to them. That is how successful living is founded. The law of the mind is a perpetual operation. I'm going to highlight this right here. The law of the mind is a perpetual operation, and it works both ways. Persons who dwell on thoughts of failure or poverty will gravitate toward like conditions. They in turn will draw them people who accept failure and poverty. On the other hand, we think on positive conditions, on success and plenty, and in the same manner enjoy full and plenty. What the mind holds within takes its form in the outer world. Now remember, he just said that what forms within us are beliefs, what we're thinking about, what we're saying. It's from the inside out. It's not from the outside in. Our circumstances are not from the outside in. We don't fix from the outside, we fix from the inside. It all comes from the inside of us. And I love what he said up here when he starts talking about the law of the mind. It goes both ways, okay? That's how laws work, and he'll get more detailed about this, but the law, it's on the same playing field, okay? The positive thoughts and negative thoughts, it's on the same plane. It goes both ways. And what I like what he says is persons who dwell on thoughts of failure or poverty will gravitate towards like conditions. They in turn will draw to them people who accept failure and poverty. This is so true. And a main example here is, let's say you go to work, and sometimes if you don't like work can be very negative. And isn't it amazing that when you start being negative, what happens? You start attracting the people that think the exact same way you do, that's negative just like you, that want to hear all your negativity. So you attract people that are in harmony with the state that you're in. The state that you're in is negativity. But likewise, the same thing happens if you start talking about being positive and start talking about what you like, what you enjoy. What ends up happening is you repel the people that are negative. They don't want to hear your happy life. So you repel them, but then you attract people that are in harmony with success. You attract people that are in harmony with they're living their life the same way. And when I read this, and even talking about it right now, I mean, it's so true. Like last time I came home from Thailand, and this is probably, a year and a half ago, I got a job in a factory just to make some extra money. And it was amazing to me because when I got a job in a factory, like people would ask me where I came from, what I've been up to, whatever. And I said, oh no, I live in Thailand. I just came back from Thailand. And it's amazing how once I started talking about what I like, living abroad, what I like to do, so many people repelled from me. So many people didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear about happy life Chad. You know what I mean? And a lot of them wouldn't talk to me. The only people that would talk to me would be people that was in the same harmony that I was, as far as thoughts, as far as positivity, living your life where you're doing things you like, you enjoy. You attract those people, but you repel the negative. Some think that we must deal with two forces, and really pay attention to this, but this is where he really describes basic laws of the universe. Every single law works in this way. Some think that we must deal with two forces. That is, to attract the good, we must do away with the bad. But this is not true. For example, if we are cold, we do not work with cold and heat alike in order to get warm. We build a fire, and as we gather around that fire, we enjoy the heat that is extended from it and become warm. As we build up warmth, cold disappears, for cold is the absence of heat. To be warm, we give our whole thought to those things which tend to create warmth. We ignore the cold and the thinking of heat and bring forth the heat. Now this is kind of tricky. He worded it tricky. But this is why I said before, any universal law, it's on the same plane. Even if we think about law of thinking, negative and positive, well, negative and positive, it's on the same plane. You're not trying to do away with negative, but it's on the same plane as positive. What we're doing is is positive thinking and negative thinking. It's on the same plane, but you can't do it together. You can't mesh them together. It's either positive or negative. So even here, he's saying the same thing. If you're cold, you build a fire and you start getting warm. You sit beside it, you start getting warm. Cold ends up disappearing because you get warm. But cold is on the same plane. You're not dealing with a cold. You're just dealing with the warmth. It's on the same plane. And every single universal law works the same way. There's always an opposite. There's a positive, there's a negative. That's how universal law works. If you're cold, there's warm. It's like the law of polarity, okay? Like the polar opposites. And that's how universal law works. If there's poverty, there's riches. But poverty and riches are all on the same plane. They're not different and really separated. So that's really the main point I'm trying to make here. It's on the same plane. With universal law, there's always an opposite. You're cold, you're hot. Okay? Same in exercise. Either you're in great shape, you're out of shape. It's on the same plane. And he explains this right here, I believe, in this paragraph. Prosperity and poverty are not two things. They are merely two sides of one and the same thing. They are but one power, rightly or wrongly used. That's what he's saying. It's on the same plane. It's one power. But no matter if you use it right or wrong, it's really up to you. We cannot think of plenty and then worry about the unfavorable conditions that may seem apparent. We think about plenty, and as we think of it, lack its opposite. We become absorbed or disappear. All of our thoughts must be directed to that one thing which we desire in order that our desire may be fulfilled. Our method is not manipulating two powers, not dealing with good and evil, right and wrong, prosperity and poverty, but as we follow the law of good and dwell upon which is good, we shall bring pass to all good things. So this is what he's meaning. Like, it's on one plane. Okay, they're not two separate things. They're on one thing. Prosperity and poverty, it's on the same plane. But as you focus on poverty, all your thoughts are... No, I'm sorry about that. As you focus on prosperity and all your thoughts are on prosperity, you're doing what you want, you're doing what you enjoy, all your conversations are on prosperity, what happens is everything starts to align in prosperity. Everything starts to attract to you prosperity, and the poverty will gradually disappear from your thoughts. But it's still on the same plane. It's still right there. That's the polar opposite here. Is there's prosperity, there's poverty. The mind force is creating continual fertile soil. Nature does not differentiate between the seed of a weed and that of a flower. She produces and causes both seeds to grow. The same energy is used for both. And so it is with the mind. The mind creates either good or bad. Your ideas determine which is to be created. So he keeps on just kind of explaining the basic law here. It's on the same plane, and it's really up to us, either good or bad, what we're going to allow our mind or allow our thoughts to focus on. Because once we allow our mind and what we allow our thoughts to focus on, no matter good or bad, that's what's going to come to us. And this is an example. The example is in purple. And I love this example. A farmer who lived in Nebraska had come from a small farm in Pennsylvania years before. Never could adjust himself to using the binder, a machine that cut and bound grain. He had been accustomed to the old hand grandle. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to reread that. He had been accustomed to the old hand cradle and tied his grain by hand. Repeatedly he said to his friends, "That binder will get me yet." He was afraid every time he climbed upon its seat. One day while he was there, his horses ran away with him, and he was thrown over the reel into the machinery. Like Job, now he's coming from the Bible now, like Job, his fears came upon him. It took just a few years to bring into reality the fears that he subconsciously had entertained and accepted. So let me paraphrase this. Now here's a farmer. He's kind of old school. So he has the machinery. He's used to doing the machinery by hand. like an old hand cradle. He used to do everything by hand. He upgraded his equipment. He doesn't have to do it by hand anymore. But he's kind of letting his mind drift off and think negative. Okay, he kind of can't adapt to the new machinery, the new method. He can't adapt to it, and at the same time, he fears this new machinery because he fears that he might be thrown over, thrown into the machinery. That's why he's afraid. He's afraid of the machinery. But what he's doing is he's focusing all his thoughts on it, and he's always telling his friends that, well, this binder will get me yet. This binder is going to end my life. This binder is going to get me yet. You know, he's putting so much focus and emotion to it. And it was only a few years where his horses got out of control, ran, and that threw him into the binder. Then Holliwell quotes Job, where our fears, what we fear the most, and we bring attention to it, we bring emotion to it, will actually come to pass. So we have to be very careful on what we fear. We have to be very careful on what we're allowing our thoughts to kind of drift off on. Now he explains it. Our fears can do so much to us that we should be most careful what we fear and worry about. Years ago, when the flu epidemic was raging throughout this country and many were dying from the plague, a newspaper published an item of interest. In bold letters, the heading read, "Do not fear the flu." It was the caption of an article written by a local doctor who explained that fear was the greatest enemy of mankind, and that it would have a tendency to break down a person's mental resistance and make him more susceptible to the disease. The world is realizing more and more that we dare not entertain in our minds any fear lest it come upon us. Now, isn't that amazing? And this just happened just, a few years ago in 2020. We had a epidemic, which I'm not too sure if I can talk so much about with YouTube. But we've actually, most of us now have experienced something like this, as we have an epidemic of the flu. And of course they put fear over everybody, and once everybody fears it, it actually, what we fear actually comes upon us. Our fear of getting the flu, a fear of getting a disease, it actually weakens our immune system because we fear it so much. We bring emotion to it. We end up making our own selves sick. And this is what he's explaining here, that this was printed in the newspaper, years and years ago, before 1967, because this is when the book was written. Do not fear the flu. So the doctors put this right in the newspaper, like, do not fear. Okay, our fear, what you fear will actually come upon you. What you fear, and this was health, what you fear will actually weaken your immune system, and then you might get sick. Whatever we think in our minds must grow. Why do you suppose the farmer goes out to weed his garden and works tediously to eliminate every weed? Because he knows that if he does not clean out the weeds, they will grow stronger and tougher and choke out his crop. If some condition handicaps us, perhaps a weed that must be plucked out, it is important to know that the condition is the effect that we see. It is not the true cause that we see. Dig down deep into the mental storehouse and find out what is that cause. Go deep. That's what I'm saying. When you have core beliefs, go deep and figure out what's the cause. Figure out, if you have a really deep-rooted belief, where did it come from? Where did it start from? Did it start from your parents teaching you? Did it start from you're so little, you're just overhearing conversations? Go deep, go to the root where it all started from. That's what he's talking about. Dig down deep into a mental storehouse and find out what is that cause. If we cannot discern it, there are others who can. Then we weed out the cause by replacing it with the right kind of thought. That is, if it is fear, replace it with courage. If it is a diseased thought, replace it with a healthy thought. If it is a limited thought, think thoughts of plenty. Force some issue whereby we alter or change the trend of the thought. Then as we replace the thoughts that, I'll reread that for you. Sorry about that. Then as we replace the thoughts that are as weeds, they will die of their natural selves. For such weeds die from lack of cultivation. And what he means by this, the weeds will die because you're not bringing energy to it. If you're not bringing, just like with thoughts, with negative thoughts, if you're not bringing emotion to it, you're not reacting to it, you're not bringing energy to it, our negative thoughts will just die because we're not feeding it. And I love this paragraph as well. Just as if you follow Neville Goddard, if you love Neville Goddard, and I'll post it here for you, that Neville Goddard talks about the same thing, or about our mind as a garden. And he does this, he wrote a book and he has an audio called Pruning Shears of Revision. And Pruning Shears of Revision, he talks about the mind as a garden, and we have to tend to our garden. We have to cut and trim the garden as a beautiful flower garden. And he calls it like revising, revision, revising your day. And he says it here, if we have a thought of disease, we replace that disease thought with thoughts of health and courage. And Neville Goddard explains the same thing, but he's kind of explaining it different when Neville Goddard explains it. Our mind's a garden, we have to revise our day. So basically what happens if we have a negative day, something negative happens in our day, when we sit down at night, we go into our imagination and we look at all of our experiences throughout the day, and what we don't like, we replace that with a different thought. We replace that with a different circumstance. So as we're replacing it, we're tending our mind, we're tending our thoughts, we're keeping our thoughts and our mind, that's almost just like a garden. We're keeping it under wraps. We're keeping it a beautiful garden. And he's saying the same thing. If we don't keep control of our thoughts, we don't keep control of what we're constantly thinking about, it grows like a weed. If you go outside and mow, and you don't mow right away, and you let it go months and months, as the weeds gets taller and taller and taller, as it gets taller and taller and taller, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. It gets so strong that you can't actually even use a mower to go over it. You have to use more of a heavy machinery to actually mow it. The same way if you live in a country. My mom and everybody lives in a country. If you don't mow and basically tend the garden, tend the grounds, the weeds will actually grow big and strong like this. You can't take a mower over them. And you have to take a more of a heavy, a heavy farm equipment or a farm mower over it to kind of cut it down so you can actually mow over it. But I kind of went on and on and on about that, on and on about that one. But as long as we allow things to seem real to us, this is powerful. As long as we allow things to seem real to us, we are putting our energy into it. We are nurturing it. We are feeding it. We are keeping it alive. We are putting our faith into that thing, whether we like it or not, and it must naturally grow, for the law of growth is ever working to produce whatever seed we plant. So whatever seed we plant, positive or negative, it has to grow, because that's how we're feeding it. We're feeding it with our emotion. We're feeding it because we're reacting to it. We're feeding it because we're constantly thinking about it. What we constantly think about, it has to grow. Remember that. This is another example that I love and I want to share. In my college days, I remember how a number of us were taken on a hazing party. It was purely a fraternal affair. So we were to be initiated and branded. So he's in a fraternity at college. So that's basically where he's at. He's in a fraternity. And when you're part of a fraternity or a sorority, they have you do things to be initiated inside the fraternity. When they come to my chum, they told him to peel off his shirt. He was blindfolded, and they were going to brand him with the initials of the order. They branded him with a hot tallow from a burning candle. Now, you know that the tallow dropping from the candle would not burn. So it's basically like putting burning wax on him, like dropping it, kind of branding his initials into it, like probably the initials of the fraternity. At least it never burned me. But my chum, his friend, he's talking about his friend here, was so excited and nervous, he thought they were really branding his back with a hot iron. So basically what's going on, he has his friend, they blindfold him in this fraternity, they're kind of really playing it up. Like they're really going to brand him almost like you brand like an animal or a cow or something, like a horse on a farm. You have a really hot iron and you're going to brand the initials on the back. That's what he's thinking. But what they're really doing is they're just using a hot candle. They're just using the hot wax from a candle. After we returned to our rooms in the dormitory, so they already did it to him. He was all bent out of shape. He's thinking in his mind, I'm really being branded. I'm really going to be burned. So afterwards, we returned in our rooms in a dormitory. I saw on his back a perfect letter as though it had been burned with a hot iron. Man can impress his thought on formless substance and cause the thing he thinks about to be created. My chum, my friend, believed he was being burned and thought it so intently that a welt rose on his flesh, which lasted for 2 days. Now listen to this. Like his friend, in this fraternity, he thought that he's really being branded with a hot iron. He thought he was really being burned, but all it was this candle wax. Well, if you drip it, I've done this. If you drip it, it's a little bit hot, but it doesn't burn your skin. It doesn't blister anything. Your skin don't even really get red. But he thought he was really being burned. He thought it was really being burned. He thought so intently this was happening that it actually burned him. It actually caused a blister and welt, and they could actually you could see the letters branded in his back for a couple of days. The power of our thoughts. Man is constantly thinking. He can change his thought, but he cannot stop thinking. This thinking power flows in and through him like the very air we breathe. Man's problem, then, is to direct his power of thinking into constructive channels of expression. It is a scientific fact that no power can act without producing some kind of an effect. And by merely thinking, we are continually producing effect. These effects register and record in our daily life. So our thoughts are going throughout the whole day. And basically what's happening here, scientifically, and it's even proven that we have about 65 to about 70,000 thoughts per day. About 70% of our thoughts are negative and redundant. So if we're 70% of the time, our thoughts are negative and they're redundant, that means we're thinking about it over and over and over and over and over again. What that means is like has to attract like. Okay, if I'm thinking negative throughout the whole day, well, it has to produce negative results in my life. It has to, I'm thinking within, it has to come out in my 3D world. It has to manifest into my 3D world, where now it's in reality. Now I can see it. Our thoughts are aimless and imperfect. We create ourselves pain and confusion. This is misdirected energy. Now, electric energy, when it is misdirected and uncontrolled, develops lightning, a most destructive agent. Yet, that same power of lightning can be harnessed to become a most obedient and useful servant for good. The first question in our self-development is, are we controlled by our thoughts, or are we controlling our thoughts? Are we using our thoughts for gain? Are our thoughts using us for continued loss? Now he's kind of flipping it to you. Are you using your thoughts for gain? Are you using your thoughts for riches and prosperity? Is that what you're constantly focused on? Or are you using your thoughts for poverty? Are you using your thoughts of continued loss? What's wrong in your life? But that's what's going to come out, manifested into your life. What are you using your thoughts for? Because that's our superpower. Okay, the law of thinking, our thoughts is our superpower. So that's why he said lightning. Lightning can be very destructive, but if it's controlled, if our superpower, just like our superpower, if we can control this superpower, if we can control our superpower of abundance, we can have anything we want. We can have any life we want if it's controlled. But most of us, it's out of control. We're not in control at all. We have no boundaries. We let our thoughts just drift wherever they want to go. We focus on whatever thought that comes to us. And most thoughts, again, is negative and redundant. So that's what we're going to focus on. Then that's what's produced or manifested into our own life. Jesus said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all things will be added." He also said, "The kingdom is within you." This is what I mean, abundance is within you. Abundance is your birthright. And this is all through the New Testament. This is why I love old school prosperity teachers, because they bring out scripture and they explain it a different way. They flip it a different way than what we're actually been taught. The kingdom is within you. Heaven is a state of mind. Therefore, heaven is an orderly, disciplined, constructive state of thinking. To gain all things, we must first gain a disciplined, orderly, constructive state of mind. Have you a disciplined mind? What that means is, a disciplined mind, do you have boundaries? Okay, do you have boundaries around your thoughts? Okay, are a disciplined mind, or are you always aware of thinking positive, what you like, what you want to do? That's a disciplined mind. And you have boundaries around it. Once you notice your mind drifts, and all of our minds drift, okay, your mind's going to drift into the negative, but once you're aware of it, you have affirmations, positive affirmations that steer you back to the positive. That's a disciplined mind, rather than our thoughts just go all over the place. Have you any dominating appetite? Are you emotional? Do you vent your feelings through impatience, temper, malice, hate, pride, envy, conceit, lies, dishonesty, and the like? Any of these negations are named. If controlling your thoughts will delay good from coming to you. Listen to this. I'll highlight this again because I want to read it again. This is so powerful. Have you any dominating appetite? Are you emotional? Okay, remember, if you're whatever you're emotional about, that's what you bring in energy to, and that's what's going to attract into your life. Positive or negative, whatever you bring in emotional to. Do you vent your feelings? Okay, do you vent to friends? Do you vent out loud? Maybe you're by yourself or you're venting out loud. Most of us vent to friends what we don't like. Are you venting to friends through impatience, temper? Do you have a temper tantrum? Do you have a meltdown? Malice, hate, pride, envy, conceit, lies, dishonesty, and the like. Any of these negations as named, if controlling your thoughts will delay good coming from you. It's so powerful. This will delay good coming from you because you're emotional about it. Anything we're emotional of, we naturally go inside our imagination. We have mental pictures. We have a whole scene, like a movie inside our head that we're playing. Maybe something bad happened at work, and we're playing that mental scene in our head and our imagination over and over and over and over and over. Then we start talking about, then we tell the same story to our friends. We tell the same story to our family. We grow impatient. We don't kind of shut our lip a little bit and think positive. We let it take control of ourselves. Anything in life that dominates us, listen to this, anything in life that dominates us makes us a servant to its dictates. So anything in life that dominates you, if it's a negative thought, if that's what dominates you, makes us a servant to its dictates. All of our weaknesses, all of our lacks are due to some compelling influence that blinds us and keeps us from us what is naturally would receive. I'm going to read that one more time so I feel like I flubbed it up a little bit. All our weaknesses and all lacks are due to some compelling influence that blinds us and keeps from us what we naturally would receive if we were free in mind to receive them. So he's really digging deeper and deeper into negative thinking, negative thoughts. If that's our dominating feeling, that's keeping us from the good that we would receive. That's keeping us from having a great life. It's keeping us from having success. Man, being a creature of nature, is endowed with the power to overcome all these mistakes, all these evil forces. That power is unfailing in its operation. When used properly, one can master any trial. Nature has no problems she cannot solve. She has no trouble she cannot remove. All her movements are governed by the law of order and discipline. Man can say and do the same if he will pattern after nature. But, first note, nature takes no chances. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. Her forces operate under law. If a stone is thrown up into the air, it falls back down again. The law says so. Thoughts in our mind are governed by a law with the same exactness. Mind is a source and cause of conditions in our lives. Hence, it is here that we start to adjust and discipline our thoughts in order to stabilize our affairs. The fact that every problem is mental is another reason why we must learn to control our thoughts to determine our lives. So every problem we have is a mental, because our kind of unique imagination goes wild. And most of the time, I don't know why this is, we always kind of gravitate naturally to negative situations. We gravitate naturally to negative thoughts. If our thought process is not disciplined and we just let it go wherever, we create emotion around it, and this is what is manifested in our life. So this is why he keeps on talking about having a disciplined mind. A disciplined mind is you're focused on what you want to focus on. You're focused on good. You're focused on health and prosperity. You're focused on what you want to do. That's what you're focused on. But is our problem mental? That's a question. Is our problem mental? Let us see. If we desire to gain wealth, we find that it is not a place nor an environment. If so, all the people in one city would be rich, and all the people in another city would be poor. Wealth is not the result of saving or of thrift. Many penurious people are poor. Many free spenders are rich. Wealth is not due to any certain business, for men in the same business are poor and rich alike. It is something within our mind of man that makes the wealth, and that something in the mind of man is the quality and type of thoughts we entertain. Look at nature again, and he's kind of going to describe this with an example. Look at nature again. We see that she has every movement well organized. A cut flower soon wilts and dies because it has been taken away from the source of its life. If a dog jumps off a barn roof, he lands with a thud and suffers pain for his act. Instinct warns a dog not to take advantage of nature. Does the hungry lion in the jungle roar and lash in an effort to find its prey? Instinct warns the lion to be quiet, to steal carefully upon his prey, to stalk its meal. Have you ever observed how Mrs. Cat will patiently wait for hours for Mr. Mouse? These samples or examples of organized actions that is instinctive to any animal. This instinct must be adhered to by man. This instinct has to be adhered to by us. This is the organized method, the constructive method. A disorganized method would be destructive and negative. Man must stalk success or any worthwhile enterprise similar to the lion who stalks its meal. Man must work himself up to gain success. He does not fall into it. Just to roar or to shout his statements is not enough. Birds of $1 will not fall out of the trees through fright. They will more likely fly away. When our ideas are organized, they are under our control. That is, our thoughts are so arranged that they work together as a single unit. Our minds must be controlled in their expressions so that every process of thought will be in orderly fashion. And I love this right here when he says, when he gives his example up through here, he's really given an example of how he's comparing how animal instinct and nature, they have to follow their instincts. They have to follow the laws of nature. If they don't follow the laws of nature, then everything's going to be destroyed. I mean, that's why he gave the example of the lion, how the lion will stalk its prey. It's quiet. It's not just running through the forest, the roaring loud, or he would never catch anything. Animals work by instinct. Animals work by intuition. And he's given this example. He's moving it over to us that we need to work by the same instinct. But he gives this example here is lots of times for us, the reason why manifesting isn't working is because, remember, force negates. If we try to force things to happen, okay, if we scream, we yell our affirmations, we're really forcing it. So force negates. That's why he says, like, birds of $1 would not fall out of the trees through fright. They will more likely fly away. So if you're trying to scare what you want to come to you, it's not going to come to you. You're going to scare it away. Because remember, force negates. Anything we force, physical force or mental force, anything we try to force to come into our lives will actually repel from us. All action is a result of thought. It determines the conditions of life. And to have better conditions in life, we must first make efforts to organize our thoughts. We wish to gain the best in life, but we do not know how to think correctly. The average person thinks at random. Remember, the average person, they don't have a disciplined mind. They're not in control of their thoughts. They're just letting it be. Whatever I think about, I just think about. If I think about negative, I just kind of go down that little roller coaster ride, go down that rabbit hole, and next thing I know, I've been thinking negative for 2 or 3 hours. The average person thinks at random. He has no clear design in his mind to which he can frame his thoughts. If he has a design, he does not direct his daily efforts towards it. Most of his thinking is beyond control, chaotic, and unorganized. This is why disappointment and failure are always near, for they thrive on indecision. I'm going to reread that to you, not the whole paragraph, but what I just highlighted. Most of our thinking is beyond control. It's chaotic and unorganized. So if we're not in control of our thoughts, we don't have a disciplined mind. All of our thoughts are beyond our control. We think we're not in control of our thoughts. Our thoughts are chaotic. They're all over the place. They're unorganized. We're thinking prosperity over here. We're thinking positive over here. We're thinking negative over here. We're thinking about what negative circumstance over here. We're thinking about how we hit our work over here. We're all over the place. And this is why disappointment and failure are always near. Then he says, for they thrive on indecision. That's why the basics to manifesting, almost the first step to any manifesting, even if you follow Never God, or the first step is to set an intention. The first step is make a clear decision, a very specific decision on what you want. Because once you make that decision, your thought process will go to it and later on manifest it in our life. But most of us we think we're making decisions, but we're really living our life in indecision. And we thrive on indecision. And this is something, I struggle with indecision, not making clear, concise decisions and sticking to that decision. We attract only what we think or create. This is the law of thinking. To achieve success, we must think it. We must work it. We must become it. To advance, we must make some effort to rise. To obtain happiness, we must adapt our lives to the law of harmony and order. To rise above any limitation, we must organize our thinking along constructive lines. I'll read that little short thing right now. Now he's really getting into law of thinking. He's kind of having his own definition of this chapter with the law of thinking. We attract only what we think or create. This is law of thinking. We attract to only what we think and create. If we're thinking negative, we're thinking poverty, we're thinking lack, well, that's what you're going to attract to you. That's the law of thinking. To achieve success, we must think it, we must work it, we must become it. Listen to that. To achieve success, we must think it, we must work it, and we must become it. If man wishes to climb a hill, he doesn't sit down on the base of it and pray to the good Lord to lift him, hoping the Lord would pick up his body and carry him to the top, or give him a pair of wings to fly. The natural thing he does first is to organize his thought. He decides he is going to climb the hill, and then he starts to climb. He climbs steadily, keeping his eye ever at the top. He may find another picking out a better trail. He may he may wind around, he may slip back a step or two, he may even fall. He may have to stop to rest to regain his strength. But as he keeps his thoughts collected and his desire intent upon reaching the top, he will eventually get there. Now you can take this little example I just read to you, and since everything is green, I'll change this over to yellow. And this is the example he gave right here, is that you could put any circumstance in this situation. Now he's trying to climb a hill. Let's say, I'm focused on being a millionaire. Okay, I'm not focused on driving a hill. So basically, what I'm going to do, I'm not gonna sit down and whine and complain and pray to the Lord to just bring me millions of dollars. I'm going to organize my thoughts. I'm going to decide that's what I want to do. And then I'm going to start moving in that direction. But now when I move in that direction, I'm not forcing anything. I'm not doing mental force. I'm waiting for my intuition to kind of guide me, and I start just moving forward. It's almost like driving a car at nighttime. When you drive a car at nighttime, especially when there's not a lot of lights in the background or outside, you just have your car lights on. You only can see maybe, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 yards in front of you. Then you can't see no more. But you don't just pull over inside the road and say, I can't see no more, I stop driving. No, the road keeps on continuing. Okay, so you keep on driving. It's the same thing for our goal. We only can see so far in front of us, but we keep on going anyway. And we keep our mind focused on the prize. We keep our mind focused on the millionaire lifestyle. And he says, he climbs steadily, keeping his eye ever at the top. And he says he may find another picking out a better trail. Maybe you swerve off. He may wind around. He may slip back a step or two. He may even fall. He may have to stop and rest to regain his strength. But as he keeps his thoughts collected and his desire intent upon reaching the top, reaching that millionaire status, he will eventually get there. You will eventually get there. Now here's another example here. I have all highlighted in purple. A woman wanted to dispose of her home. She couldn't understand what was delaying her answer. For she had been praying. She said, for some time, I asked her, what do you do towards working with the law? Tell me what you did yesterday. Well, she said, she prepared breakfast for her family. Then she got the children off to school. Then she said she always spent 30 minutes with her in silence and reading. After that, Mrs. Jones called her on the phone. They had a lengthy chat, but it was of little importance. Then it was time to prepare lunch. After lunch, her neighbor called her out to see the garden, and she stood there and talked over the fence for more than an hour. But I asked, what did you do between these incidents? Oh, she replied, whatever came to my notice that had to be done. I was busy all the time, but somehow, she added, I never liked housework. Where did she fail? First of all, she lacked discipline in her mind, except where others demanded it. Now, is this you? Listen to this. First of all, she lacked discipline in her mind, except where others demanded it. She didn't have any boundaries around what she needed to do, what she needed to get done. She just kind of went with the flow. Whoever demanded her time, she went with it. Her husband demanded it. The school demanded it. So she got the breakfast and the children off to school on time. She didn't make any effort towards selling your house, I stated. You thought 30 minutes in silence would do it. Instead of organizing your time and work, you did just whatever came along. Her housework controlled her. She did not control her time or her work. She saw the truth. She went back home, and each day thereafter outlined her work mentally. If she talked with a friend or a neighbor, it was for just a definite time, not any length of time. Each day her work was planned so that she would accomplish something toward preparing to sell the house. Several weeks later, a letter came to me in which this woman stated that the house had been sold at a good price. And she added, "Do you know, I really love my work now. When the day is done, I have accomplished so much more, and I am not nearly as tired as before. I am teaching my children to be orderly thinkers." Do you do just whatever comes along? That's a question to you, and a question to me. Do you do just whatever comes along? Do you plan your day that something definite will be accomplished towards your aim, your ambition? See, and this is kind of like this is kind of an example and a paraphrase, over a disciplined mind, having boundaries in your mind, even with your thoughts, having boundaries. I mean, once you're aware of you're thinking in a negative, you have a boundary that, no, I'm not going to think in a negative. You start having affirmations to pull you back over to the positive. Same way in your life, you have boundaries, around your life. It kind of follows, the law kind of follows. If you have an undisciplined mind, you probably have an undisciplined life. If you have no boundaries in your personal life, you have no boundaries around your relationships, you have no boundaries around friends or relationships that they can just treat you, talk to you any way you want, well, that's going to connect to you really have no boundaries in your thoughts, no boundaries in your mind as well. Because you basically, whatever happens, you're just going with. There's no type of control or orderly conduct to kind of have order in your life. If we have problems, it is because we are not controlling our ideas. Say that one more time. If we have problems, it is because we are not controlling our ideas. Nature has no problems because she is orderly and disciplined. Self-control consists of an organized thought direction. That is, we start out with a well-defined aim or objective, think toward it continuously, not just for 30 minutes, plan our time and work so that fills our day so full of constructive duties that there is no room for idle chatter or waste of any kind to enter. This development will enable us to move steadily upward toward success. When all things are in harmony and order, problems will cease to be perplexities, and mysteries will cease to be mysteries. Knowledge and understanding will supplant fear and ignorance. So knowledge and understanding will replace fear and ignorance. And that which was invisible will become visible. That which was unknown will become known. Life with its circumstances is no longer an enigma, but a clear interpretation of the law of thinking. We are what we are according to the state of thinking. We attract only what we think or create. I thought this was on green. Sorry about that. I want to end it right here. We got one more thing to discuss. But remember, when we wrap this chapter up, we attract only what we think and create. Now the big issue here is most people, our thoughts are all over the place. It's chaotic. There's no control. There's no order. There's no boundaries in our mind. What we're going to think about, we just think about whatever comes, and we react to it. We bring emotion to it. Most of the time, it's on the negative, and that's what's manifested in our life. Remember, it works from the inside out. Okay, it starts off on the inside. Our core beliefs will manifest outward, and what we think about redundantly will manifest outward. It's just simple. What we attract only what we think and create. So what I like to do is just wrap up this chapter with this little poem here. Thoughts are things, and this is by Henry Van Dyke. Let me read it to you, then we'll wrap this up. Thoughts are things. I hold it true that thoughts are things. They're endowed with bodies and breath and wings, and that we send them forth to fill the world with good results or ill. That which we call our secret thought speeds forth to earth's remotest spot, leaving its blessings or its woes like tracks behind it as it goes. We build our future thought by thought, for good or ill, yet know it not. Yet so the universe was wrought. Thought is another name for fate. Choose then thy destiny and wait. For love brings love, and hate brings hate. By Henry Van Dyke. Thoughts are things. That's the power of our thoughts. Like attracts like. Hey everybody, thanks for hanging in. This is the end of chapter 2. Remember, like attracts like. Whatever we focus on, that's what we're going to attract in our life. That's what eventually going to manifest to us. Comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts, your pros and cons. If you're struggling with this material or if you have deeper questions, comment below and I'll try my best to answer all of them. Other than that, I'll see you in chapter 3, and blessings to you, and hang in there, and I'll see you at the top.